Hi guys, welcome back from spring break. Today we're going to go over chapter 5 in the book, the lecture notes. So hopefully you'll follow along. It is really important that you actually read the chapter so that you're able to do this week's homework. This week you have a quiz, so it's really important that you get all the small details and important information from the chapter. All right, let's get started. Okay, so again, this is from Fashion Forecasting, the 5th edition. Okay, we are now in part 2 of the book, and part 2 is all about forecasting influences. Chapter 5 is specifically on the different eras of fashion. Some objectives that you should understand after this lecture and reading the chapter combined are understanding the concept of the zeitgeist. Okay, what is the zeitgeist and how it impacts contemporary fashion? The zeitgeist is very important for trend forecasting and also every aspect of the industry. How to differentiate between the 3 modern phases of fashion and understand the influence of each phase on contemporary fashion. So we'll go over those 3 modern phases. And then connecting the different major fashions from the 20th centuries to changes in the zeitgeist and recognize the corresponding style evolution. So how it has changed according to the zeitgeist. Okay, so Nordstrom's framework for observing the zeitgeist. First of all, the zeitgeist is the general cultural climate of a specific period of time. So typically we do a zeitgeist for every year, right? So the zeitgeist would be very different if we compared 2020 to 2022. 2020 was a year of a lot of devastation, a lot of changing our way of life, changing the way we dress, changing jobs, fight or flight mode. And 22 is a bit different, right? So far. So it's essentially describes the climate of a time. And that doesn't only mean in fashion, it can mean culturally, politically, it can mean a lot of different things. Just what was the mood or the climate of that year, okay? So there's a couple of factors within the economics of fashion, and you'll need to know this for your quiz. So the first is dominating events, dominating ideals, dominating social groups, dominating attitude, and dominating technology. Okay, so there's a bunch of theories that are related to the zeitgeist. The first is the vertical flow, a theoretical model by Breitling in 1985 to 1986 that uses the median age of the population combined with the fiscal dominating events of the zeitgeist to explain fashion change. Okay, so typically we start here, the median age, and then we also establish the economic health of the country. Okay. And we use these 2 factors to understand the change in fashion. So if we have a high median age, then the fashion typically ends to trickle down because with a high median age, we typically have an economic health of the country that is in a state of depression, has general government regulations, and this typically slows down change or distorts change. So when we have a bad economic state of the country and we also have a high median age of population, we typically have a slower change in the industry, right? So people are slower to adopt trends, people are slower to actually purchase and use different ideas that are coming out. When we have a lower median age of the population, okay, we tend to use the trickle up theory and a great economic health of the country. So that means that we have more discretionary income, prosperity. There's a great outlook on where we're going economically. We typically have change accelerated. I mean, we're adopting and we're making and we are producing and people are excited. So people are willing to accelerate the change with us. A major role model in this whole thing is an affluent upper class, okay, in this part, in the trickle down theory, and the major role model in the trickle up is the young. Okay, so things come from the young are excited, the young have money, and they accelerate the change. When we're talking about this, we talk about an upper class that still has money despite the economic health of the world, and they continue to thrive, to drive change, even though it's a slow process. Bloomer's theory of collective selection, okay, so you guys will have to know all of these theories. It explains that individuals in large numbers choose styles that click or connect with the spirit of the times. This forms a feedback loop between the fashion industry and the consumer, right? So a big group of people are essentially deciding to select or connect with something that aligns with the spirit of the times. So aligns with how you're feeling, aligns with how, economics is, aligns with cultural change, right? So a big group is deciding to kind of band together and make these choices together. Fashion leaders and followers alike are part of the simultaneous and collective process that responds to change and tastes, which reflect movement on modern life. So typically, the leaders and the followers are those biggest groups, and they are part of the process where they're collectively making these decisions, which ultimately will respond or result in changes in tastes, right? So if all fashion followers are done with skinny jeans and they're done with that part of fashion, then, and they start to, adopt that wider silhouette in bottoms, then that is going to change and reflect a change in taste, which is ultimately going to reflect, the movement of modern life and modern purchases. This theory offers little advance warning. So a large number of people can make a decision to go in a certain way, and we as forecasters have little warning as to what those choices are. Okay, some fashion eras that you need to understand. So a fashion era can be characterized by a designer signature style. Okay, so if something a designer does really affects that era, like Christian Dior with the new look. Okay, that era of fashion was all about the new look, that silhouette, giving women a new look, coming out of that depression. Okay, so that is an example of the designer signature style. A style leader. Okay, we can talk about Kim Kardashian and the Balenciaga looks, right? A lot of people are over it, myself included, but that is a huge time. It's a huge influence on this era of fashion, right? That look, that brand, her influence in fashion, really important. A fashion look, so a specific look, a bohemian element, a market segment. So like Gen Zers, what are they doing, right? What are the baby boomers doing? What are the millennials doing? So a market segment, a celebrity icon. Okay, we can also talk about Kim Kardashian in that. A model or a fiber or fabric that's new on the scene or that everyone uses. So the 70s would be polyester. Okay, fashion looks, the flapper look. Okay, the prosperous years after First World War. Okay, this is going back in time. This is also known as the Jazz Age or the Gin Age. Okay, flappers is a typical look considered of a bobbed hair, powdered and rouge on the face, use of lipstick, plucked eyebrows, low cut and sleeveless bodice, absence of corset, which was very different for the times, little underclothing, also very different for that time, and often only a teddy bear. Okay, high skirts, roll your own stockings. This was very advanced for this time, and that's why it was such an iconic look. Okay, the siren look. This look was influenced by film and cinema. It required a very fit, long, and lean physique with wide shoulders and small waist and thin hips. So this was the look of this time. It also, which is really interesting, required a certain body type in order to pull it off. This was all about natural waistline, emphasis on the length of the legs with long draped folds of fabric, bias cut dresses and trousers. The new look, okay, this is a reaction against World War II rationing. This featured broad shoulders, emphasized bust, had a fitted waist that was often belted, a full skirt that emphasized the hips, and a hemline that extended to the middle of the wearer's calves. So this was kind of in rebellion to people being poor, not having enough, and having this over-exaggerated silhouette of the women, and Christian Dior really did this first. The youthquake look, which means when it shifted the dominance of power to London. This is all about Mary Quant, the mother of the miniskirt, okay, synthetic textiles, more interesting textures and patterns that had been previously available to consumers. So this was really fun, rebellious, bright colors, patterns, kind of that 60s like go-go look. The retro look are styles copied or modified from previous eras. An old-fashioned appearance, okay, so young men wearing the granddaddy look, or young women wearing the granny look, or that cottagecore look, that can be considered as the retro look, okay? The power dressing look is the yuppie, quotation marks, the young urban professional, the well-educated, affluent, career-minded individual. Person that kind of comes to mind is like Princess Diana, right? That 80s kind of power suit. You work in the stock market, that kind of yuppie type of look. A power suit with a long jacket with big padded shoulders, a straight skirt, a silk shirt with a bow tied at the neck. Okay, this was popularized by an author called John T. Malloy in Dress for Success in the Women's Dress for Success book. So this book had a really big influence. The 80s had an influence that kind of dressed that era. Phases of modern fashion. In the book Empire of Fashion, fashion theorist Gilles Levitzky identified 3 phases of modern fashion, which are a convenient way to view change. So the first phase of modern fashion is from the 1860s to the 1960s. Paris was considered at this time the center of innovation. That's the hub of fashion. Charles Frederick Worth, the first courtier, established a system that is still used today, very important. And the daytime dress became more comfortable and functioned throughout this phase. So it started as a very intricate, very layered, and very uncomfortable thing for women. And into the 60s, it became something that was loose fitting, short, easy to move in, breathable, and that came in a lot of different fun textures and colors. The second phase of modern fashion is known from youthfulness and novelty as ideals. It has a 2-tier fashion system. So we now have couture and ready-to-wear fashion. So we also got a division in designers in that way, where designers either decided to stay in couture or actually expand to ready-to-wear fashion. Designers became brand names for a variety of products. So this is also really important. If we talk about Gucci, not only did they make clothes, but they're making shoes and sunglasses and perfumes and houseware. So they're putting that name on a variety of different products. And there was emphasis on the values of individual expression, spontaneity, the humor of stylistic collages and juxtaposition. So this really was the era of modernizing and being okay with who you were and expressing yourself through dress and not just wearing what everyone else was. The third phase of modern fashion was all about diversity and acceptable looks and blurring of the line between what is in and out of fashion. So in this third phase of fashion, it was almost cool to be out of fashion because you were making a point. You were standing your ground on what you believed was acceptable. There's a broad range of alternative looks that became acceptable, and consumers filter from the many options and choose those that fit their individual aesthetic. So you're finally dressing for your personal look, your personal style, regardless of what the industry or the movement is telling us what is cool. Long wave phenomenon in fashion cycles. So forecasters do their best to anticipate the size and the duration of a style's popularity. It's very hard to do. Part of that estimate involves recognizing fashion cycles. So fashion ideas that return periodically to popularity. So the bell bottom, it was very popular in the 70s. Is it reoccurring? It came back a bit in the early 2000s. 20 years later, now it's back again. So how long are those cycles going to last and how frequently are they going to come back? Recycling fashion ideas is part of the historic continuity. You'll need to know this for your quiz. The steady evolution of clothing, including the continual recurrence of symbolism, styles, and elements of decoration. So how do fashion ideas recycle? How do we modernize them? When do they come back? And what is the evolution of those pieces? And retro fashion. This capitalizes upon the nostalgia for other periods when a particular look was fashionable. Let's talk about Laver's law. So this demonstrates the cyclic nature of fashion and the population's opinion of past styles through timeline of acceptability. As a style, look, or lifestyle moves further into the past, it becomes a candidate for revival because the perception of it changes. This is really important. So after a trend or a look or a style leaves us, we don't want anything to do with it. But the more and more far away it gets from us, we are actually more apt to adapt it again because our perception changes of what it is. Okay, so fashion change is often the result of revising an obsolete style or reinventing an outdated trend, right? So the low-rise jeans that are coming back in, we have revised this obsolete style that was so out of touch for almost 20 years, and now we're bringing it back in different styles. Yeah, so we look at this, you know, we can kind of categorize this by different years. Okay, so if something has been around for 150 years and it's still popular, like the little black dress, the trench coat, those kind of things, it's considered beautiful. If it's been around for 20 years, it's considered amusing. If it's been around for a year, it's considered dowdy, like it's almost done with. We need to move on to the next thing. Yeah, so you can kind of see how they categorize it here. Laver's ideas provide a timeline that forecasters can use engaging probable reactions to fashion revivals. Menswear designers also frequently take inspiration from vintage style. So you can see this example here, an example from the 70s to an example of today, how we use that same color, the rise in the denim, having the turtleneck, all of it is very similar, but it's modernized for the times. Wave dynamics, okay? Fashion academics in the 20th century searched for indication of patterns by doing rigorous fashion counts that found regularities and reoccurring patterns. So this is kind of a way, this table shows a way to find a pattern in fashion fluctuations. Steps 1 through 5. Step 1 is find a suitable source for fashion images, okay? Fashion periodicals are frequently used. Step 2, because not all images can be included in the sample, we're going to develop a systematic way to decide which images will be excluded. So maybe where you can't see the full look because the model's not looking the right way, or maybe the item is not pictured in full length. Step 3, you're going to standardize a set of measurements or observations to be taken every image in the sample. Step 4, the sample time as well as images by developing a systematic way to decide which issues of a periodical will be used and for what time or span of years. And then you're going to gather the data and analyze them to reveal the patterns of fashion change. So if we look at dresses from 1920 to 1990, out of all these images we've acquired, what has been the change in the day dress? Has it gotten longer? Has it gotten shorter? Have we added sleeves? Have we added color, texture? Have we gone back to the silhouettes of the 50s or the 60s? So we can do this on our own, where we collect images and we start to analyze the change that has gone through the times. All right, that's chapter 5 for you guys. Please read that. And then you will have a quiz at the end of your module. Thank you guys. Bye.